Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's Dr. Lindner. Now that we've covered the four different types of tissue, epithelial, muscle, connective, and nerve, we're going to run through some slides and see if we can identify these. So remember, in epithelium, it's a bunch of cells that are closely packed together. And if it's one cell layer thick, we refer to it as simple. If it's multiple layers or more than one, it's stratified. If they're these flat, irregular shaped cells, they're squamous. If they're boxes or cubes, they're cuboidal. And if they're tall columns, they're columnar. Simple if it's one layer, stratified if it's multiple. Then we have transitional that are found around the urinary tract. Let's keep that in mind, urinary. Whether it's the urethra, urinary bladder, or ureters. Okay, so here, if you look at the top, it says simple, squamous, epithelium, and we're looking at a venule. So this is an artery. This is a vein. This is the lumen of a venule, right? If we're looking at a cross section, right? If this is the artery or the vein, but we're looking at it this way, now we're looking at this type of cross section, right? I'll put an L in there. That's the lumen. So this is the lumen. So we want to focus on the cells that are just next to the lumen. So if this is the lumen, we have to look at these cells here. And these are flat, irregular shaped cells. They're flattened like pancakes. It's only one cell layer thick. So it's simple squamous epithelium. Simple squamous epithelium is typically found in veins and even arteries. Okay, now we're looking at simple squamous epithelium from a different view. Notice that these are these irregular shaped cells. They're not columnar, they're not columns, they're not cubes, they're flat and irregular. And they have these central nuclei. They're pretty much in the center. Those are squamous cells, one cell layer, simple squamous epithelium. Remember, fat cells have a similar shape, but the nuclei are really right at the edge, right at the periphery. Okay, this is a kidney. And again, the arrow is pointing to these cells here, close to this lumen, and these are flat once again, and they're one cell layer thick, so simple squamous epithelium. Okay, now we're looking at the kidneys again, and this is probably going to be part of the proximal convoluted tubule or even the distal convoluted tubule. And these, again, once again, this is the lumen. That's a lumen. And now we're looking at these cells here. They're closely packed together, so we know it's epithelium. These are not flat and irregular. These look like squares or cubes, so it's simple cuboidal epithelium. Again, we're looking at similar structure. Again, here is the kidney. There's the lumen right here. And these are simple cuboidal epithelium, one cell layer thick going around the periphery. And again, proximal convoluted tubule, always simple cuboidal. Even if it's the distal convoluted tubule, that too will be simple cuboidal epithelium. Good for filtration and secretion. Again, we have these cubes. It's one cell layer thick. So these are going, this is now the distal convoluted tubule. Again, there's the kidney, simple cuboidal epithelium. Okay, now we're looking at the small intestine. Where we have the small intestine, remember, we're going to have these columnar cells. And usually in the intestines is where we're going to have microvilli, so that the nutrients are going to be absorbed into those. So these are microvilli. These are simple columnar cells. And then we have these cells that are called goblet cells. And what do goblet cells do? Goblet cells secrete mucus. So when it secretes it, it's going to release it, and it's going to move this way, and it's going to move this way. It's going to stick to the top of the microvilli and allow for absorption of nutrients. Here again is simple columnar epithelium, but what's really cool, look at these goblet cells, right? This goblet cell here is actually showing exocytosis. It's showing the secretion and release of the mucus to the outer layer. But these are simple columnar epithelium. Notice that most of the nuclei are really in the same plane. So simple columnar epithelium. Same thing here. These nuclei are in the same plane. These are column-shaped. It's only one cell layer thick. So these are simple columnar epithelium. And right at the very edge, they're microvilli for absorption. You could see a little bit of a goblet cell right there, right? This is part of it. It was cut off. Now, this one, a little bit different. We're looking at the trachea. Trachea always has those columnar cells, but look at the nuclei. They're at so many different levels. So we call it pseudo stratified, ciliated columnar, right? There are cilia there. These are the cilia. These are goblet cells. We know goblet cells are going to secrete mucus. When it secretes mucus, these cilia are going to be beating rhythmically to move the nutrients across. Okay. If this is the trachea, it's the cilia that can be burned off by the smoke. It can be burned off by smoke, and then these are no longer there. How are you going to get rid of the debris and all the foreign dust particles that you're inhaling in? That becomes a problem. And that's when those pseudostratified cells change, they morph. They call it metaplasia. Metaplasia. Metaplasia is when one type of cell alters in shape and becomes something else. The pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium becomes squamous cells. That's metaplasia. Metaplasia is always precancerous. It's always precancerous. Here's another view of the trachea. So we have this pseudo-stratified. You can see that the nuclei are at multiple levels. So it looks stratified, but it's false. So it's pseudo-stratified, ciliated columnar epithelium. We can see the goblet cells. Again, they're going to secrete mucus. It's the trachea. That's why smoking is very bad. We want to protect and not paralyze those cilia at all. Again, there's a trachea, pseudostratified columnar epithelium. We can see cilia. We can see these columnar cells, but the nuclei are at multiple levels. And we can see the goblet cells here. Okay, now we're looking at the esophagus, and we're looking at this top layer here. And it's flat, irregular shaped cells. So it's more than one cell layer. So it's stratified. They're flat and irregular. So it's stratified squamous epithelium. Many, many layers. Here's another one. This is the vaginal area. Again, we look at the top few layers. Right here's the lumen, or the apical surface. Again, it's stratified because it's many layers. They're flat and irregular shaped. Stratified squamous epithelium. We look at a close-up view. Again, we could see these flat, irregular shaped cells. Stratified squamous epithelium. This is in the skin. Again, the top portion of it. Stratified squamous epithelium. This is thin skin. Again, this upper portion right here, stratified squamous epithelium, flat, irregular cells. Here's the esophagus. Again, all of this, multiple layers, right? When you're swallowing food, what if you swallow a sharp cracker with a corner to it and it scratches this? You don't want to get an ulcer. You don't want to bleed. So it has many layers of protection, right? We're inviting the outside world into the mouth. You're chewing food, swallowing it. If this gets irritated or an abrasion, you want to be sure that it's got many, many layers to protect it. Again, stratified squamous epithelium. All of this, many layers. Now we're looking at a sweat gland. And here's the lumen. And now we have these cuboidal cells, but they're not one layer, they're multiple layers, right? 1, 2, maybe even 3 layers. So we call that stratified cuboidal epithelium. Stratified cuboidal epithelium. This is the urinary bladder. Whenever we see the urinary system, we always play it safe and choose transitional. The cells can be different shapes. Here it's flat, here it's cuboidal. This looks a little columnar. So they alter in their shape. That's transitional. Again, this is the urinary bladder. It's transitional epithelium. These look like cubed. These look a little flat. This one looks round. These look a little bit longer. So transitional once again. And again, here's the lumen. So we're going to be looking at those layers right there near the lumen. Again, urinary bladder, transitional. These are a little roundish. These are a little flat. These look a little cubed. These look a little bit longer. So again, they're varying in their shape and size. It's transitional. Now this one's really neat. This one is an artery. And arteries, we can see 2 different types of tissue. Here's the lumen. So here, and the inside of the lumen, this is simple squamous epithelium. This is prone to damage, right? Smoking, eating fried foods, this internal layer, which is simple squamous epithelium, that right there is easily damaged. But look at the other layer. This is smooth muscle. From here to here, let me change the color of that. Let's make it blue. So from here to here, this is smooth muscle. This is the layer that you have no control over that can constrict or dilate the size of that lumen to increase or decrease your blood pressure. So, you know, if this does show up and it says what type of tissue is it, you have to make sure, are we pointing to this, which is simple squamous, or are we pointing to this, which is smooth muscle? This is areolar connective tissue. Once you start to see these hashtags like this, these fibers crisscrossing like that, this is areolar tissue. This is what separates the skin from the muscle. Okay. This is another areolar. You can see a bunch of those fibers, looks like hashtags all over the place. That's areolar connective tissue. Reticular connective tissue has this type of appearance, and it's what makes up most of your organs. And here's our adipose or fat cell. Okay, when you look at fat cell, they look like squamous cells, right? But you don't see nuclei in the center here. You just don't. The nuclei are towards the periphery, right? You don't even see many of them. They're hidden in the periphery. Okay, again, if this was squamous cell, we'd see big nuclei in the center of these. If you don't see them, they're adipose. What's going to fill this up are toxins and sugar. Here is our dense regular connective tissue. Notice how all these collagen fibers are interwoven in nice parallel forms. That's dense regular connective tissue, like if we were looking at a tendon or a ligament. And then here's dense, another dense regular. Again, the fibers are nice and tight. They're interwoven in the same direction. And then there's dense irregular, where you could see the collagen fibers are not as tight as these. They're kind of in a multitude of varying directions. So we'll find this in the dermis of the skin. We'll find it in the eyeball as well. Again, here's dense, irregular, where the collagen fibers are scattered in a variety of directions. When you see these raindrops, this is hyaline cartilage. This is what we find between our movable joints that can degenerate. This type of appearance where you see these raindrops, these icicle-looking things, that's going to be hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage, hyaline cartilage. And then here's our compact bone. This is our osteon. This is where you have all those concentric rings, like you chopped a tree down in half. Concentric rings, the lacunae, the osteocytes. This is compact bone. These are the concentric lamellae, the central canal. This is one entire osteon. These are the lamellae, concentric lamellae. These black things here, these are lacunae. And what's inside of it is an osteocyte. And then those little extensions coming off of it, those are the canaliculi. So here's the canaliculi. Here's the lacunae. What sits inside of that is the osteoblast that actually became an osteocyte. And then right in the center, that's the central canal or the version canal. That's where we have the arteries and the veins, nerve, all traveling through there. This is connective tissue, right? This is blood. This happens to be, looks like 1, 2, 3. When you start to see 3 heads to that, and the granular, 3 to 5 nuclei is a neutrophil. These are red blood cells, right? The center is hypochromic. And then all throughout here, this is all plasma. All this liquid here, this is plasma. All plasma. So you have cells that are scattered far apart. They're not together like epithelium. That's what makes it connective tissue.